Hello friends, welcome to Premier UPSC IAS. So, continuing with the economy lectures, today we are going to cover economy in India from agriculture in India. Introduction. Agriculture remains the most important sector of the Indian economy, whether it be the pre-independence or the post-independence period. This fact is evident by a large number of people who depend on agriculture for their livelihood. From the monetary point of view, the share of agriculture sector in the economy remains at 17 to 18% of the GDP as per the economic survey of 2017-18, even for now also. In the fiscal 1950-51, agriculture accounted for 55.4% in the GDP. The share of agriculture has been falling in the country's gross income. While industrial and services sectors shares have been on a rise constantly. But from the livelihood point of view, still more than 50% of people of India depend on the agricultural sector. This makes it a more important sector than the industry and the services. It means that more than half of India's population lives with only 17 to 80% of the total income of the Indian economy. This fact clearly substantiates the reason why the people who depend on agriculture are poor. In the developed economies such as the USA, France, Norway, the UK, and Japan, agriculture contributes only 2% of their GDP, with only 2% of people dependent on this sector for their livelihood. While in India, agriculture is such as the biggest sector of the economy, the biggest private sector, the biggest unorganized sector. It accounts for more than 90% share in the total unorganized labor force. These are the only profession who still carries no burden of individual income tax, as the income tax is not applicable to the agricultural income. According to the export figures, agriculture is deeply related to industrial growth and the national income in India. As a 1% increase in agricultural growth leads to 0.5% increase in industrial growth output and 0.7% increase in the national income of India. Nearly 66% of the cropped area in the economy still depends on uncertainties of monsoon for their irrigational requirements. Indian cropping seasons. The Indian cropping season is classified into the following two main seasons based on the monsoon, such as kharif and rabi. The kharif cropping season is from July to October during the southwest or summer monsoon, and rabi cropping season is from October to March during the northeast returning or winter monsoon. The crops that are cultivated between March and June are summer crops known as the zayads. The terms kharif and rabi originate from the Arabic language where kharif means autumn and rabi means spring. The kharif crops include rice, maize, sorghum, pearl, millet, bajra, finger millet, ragi, cereals, arhar, pulses, soybean, groundnut, oilseeds, cotton, etc. The rabi crops include wheat, barley, oats, cereals, chickpea or gram pulses, linseed, mustard, oilseeds, etc. Land reforms in India. Objective of land reforms. At the time of independence, India was a typical agrarian economy and had inherited a very inequitable agrarian system. Land reforms will be a major plank of Indian independent India, and as part of the agrarian reforms, it was made clear by the pledge of the Indian National Congress in 1935 itself. Land reforms in India had three objectives, similar to the other economies which opted for it in the past. 1. Removing institutional discrepancies of the agrarian structure. 2. The other objective of the land reforms in India was related to the issue of socio-economic inequality intertwined with the caste system of India. More than 80% of the population from its livelihood inherited the agrarian system which had inequitable ownership of the asset, that is, the land to earn income. On the logical grounds and with public welfare approach, The government wanted to go for a restructuring of the land ownership in the economy. 3. The third objective of the land reforms in India was highly contemporary in nature, which did not get enough socio-political attention in the first phase of land reforms just after independence. It was the objective of increasing agricultural production for solving the interrelated problems of poverty, malnutrition, and food insecurity. Government initiatives. To realize these objectives of the land reforms, the government took three main steps, which had many internal sub-steps. 1. Abolition of intermediaries. Under this step, the age-old exploitative land tenure systems of the zamindari, mahalwari, and rayotwari were fully abolished. Tenancy reforms. Under this broader step, three interrelated reforms protecting the land tenants were enacted. 1. Regulation of rent. 2. Security of tenure. 3. Ownership rights to the tenants, land to the tillers. 3. Reorganization of agriculture. This step again has many interrelated and highly logical provisions in the direction of rational agrarian reforms such as redistribution of land among the landless poor masses, consolidation of the land, and cooperative farming. Reasons for the failure of land reforms. The whole attempt of land reforms in India is considered a big failure by the majority of experts. Many consider the issue of land reforms in India as the most complex socio-economic problem of human history. The data regarding the numerical achievements of the land reforms have been highly discouraging. The whole process of land reforms could benefit only 6% of the operated area of the country with a negligible socio-economic positive impact. Out of the many reasons forwarded by the experts responsible for the failure of the land reforms in India, the following three could be considered the most important ones. Land in India is considered a symbol of social prestige, status, and identity. Unlike the other economies which succeeded in their land reform programs, where it is seen as just an economic asset for income earning. 2. Lack of political will, which was required to affect the land reforms and make it a successful program. 3. The rampant corruption in public life, political hypocrisy, and leadership failure in the Indian democratic system. Land reforms and green revolution. It was the failure of the land reforms which made the government easily attractive towards the new policy of the green revolution in the coming times. Since land reforms had failed to increase agricultural production, the government opted for the route of increasing the productivity to reach the same goal, that is, initiation of new techniques of agriculture. Once the government launched the green revolution, the issue of land reforms almost got marginalized due to the following reasons. 1. There is an inherent diabolic relationship between the Green Revolution and land reforms, as the former suits to bigger and economic land holdings, the latter intended to fragment the land among a large number of the masses. 2. The land reform was socially opposed by the land owning caste lobbies, while there was no such opposition to the Green Revolution. 3. The level of legislative attempts taken by the governments regarding the land reforms till date had almost no positive socio-economic impact on the country, while the Green Revolution was having all potential of proving higher yields of the food grains. 4. The subsidized supplies of food grains under the PL 480 were hampering India from carving out its independent diplomacy, as well as there has always remained a doubt about the regular supplies of wheat. International pressure, as well as the suggestions from the World Bank, besides the success stories of the Green Revolution from the countries where it had increased the yield of wheat. Land reforms and economic reforms. The second phase of land reforms can be traced in the process of economic reforms. Once the economic reforms started in the early 1990s, the issue of the land reform looks logically going to the back burner. Though many state governments have revived their new commitments to the matter of land reforms, the market economy approach to reform hardly got materialized. But later on, economic reforms exposed the economy to the new and emerging realities, such as land acquisition and leasing, food related issues, and the agricultural provisions of the World Trade Organization. The National Land Records Modernization Program (NLRMP), started in 2008, aims at updating and digitizing land records by the end of the 12th plan. According to the Economic Survey of 2012 and 13, Government of India has taken a shift in its policies towards the issue of land reforms. Therefore, a clear three-step policy looks emerging, such as mapping the land carefully and assigning conclusive title, devising a fair but speedy process of land acquisition, and putting in place a transparent and effective land leasing policy. Right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement Act 2013. The Department of Land Resources is administering the right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement Act of 2013. This act came into force in 2014 by repealing the Land Acquisition Act of 1894. It was observed that some provisions of the act were making the implementation of the act difficult, and this made it necessary to bring changes in the act while safeguarding the interest of farmers and affected families in cases of land acquisition. In addition, procedural difficulties in the acquisition of lands required for important national projects required to be mitigated. In order to remove them, certain amendments were made in the Act while further strengthening the provisions to protect the interest of the affected families. Accordingly, the Cabinet in December 2014 approved the proposal of the Department of Land Resources to amend the Act, but the amendment bill was being opposed by the political parties belonging to the opposition. Hence, an ordinance of RFC TLARR Amendment Ordinance 2014 was promulgated to give effect to the changes. Land Bill 2015. The RFC TLARR Amendment Bill 2015, popularly known as Land Bill, was adopted by the Lok Sabha but still not passed by Parliament. The bill creates five special categories of land use, such as 1. Defense, 2. Rural infrastructure, 3. Affordable housing, 4. Industrial corridors, and 5. Infrastructure projects, including the public private partnership projects where the central government owns the land. The bill exempts the five categories from provisions of the Law Act 2013, which requires the consent of 80% of the landowners to be obtained for private projects and that of 70% of landowners for private and public partnership projects. The bill allows an exemption for projects in these five categories from requiring the social impact assessment to be done to identify those affected and from the restrictions on the acquisition of irrigated and multi-crop land imposed by Law Act 2013. The bill brings provisions for compensation, rehabilitation, and resettlement under the other related acts such as National Highways Act and Railways Act in consonance with the Law Act. Way forward. Leasing seems a better choice in face of farmers' opposition, seen in recent times in different states towards attempts at land acquisition. Again, if the country needs to attract investment from the organized private sector, domestic or foreign, land leasing seems a better option than land acquisition. Corporate farming has not taken place in the country in a big scale, especially in the areas of food grains production, which India needs to ensure food security and compete in the global grain market in particular and the agri market in general. Giving privacy to leasing will solve several problems, such as it will keep land ownership in the hands of the existing farmers, it will prevent mass landlessness and unemployment among the farmers. Farmers will get a permanent source of income. In the meantime, they might be imparted skills and provide better employment in industries, and it will make land easily available for use of public and private purposes, since the model land leasing law proposed by the Niti Aayog in 2016 is giving encouraging results in the states. The recent emphasis on the promotion of the manufacturing sector and smart cities are hugely dependent on smoother and speedier process of land acquisition. The country needs to migrate the extra labor force of the agriculture sector to industry smoothly. The issue of land acquisition is to establish a logical equation with environmental issue in order to make the process of development sustainable. As the government of India has changed its orientation towards the issue of land reforms, the states in India are still trying to accelerate and continue the process of land reforms of phase 1. Agricultural holdings. The average size of land holding in India is continuously decreasing due to rapid and high population growth. The continuous division and fragmentation of holdings have increased the number of holdings, obviously of smaller size. According to the results of agricultural census, total number of operational holdings in the country had increased from 138 million in 2010-11 to 146 million. Operated area, on the other hand, had risen only marginally. Rise in number of holdings without a corresponding increase in the area clearly showed the pressure of population on land, with an average size of holding declining from 1.16 hectare in 2010-11 to 1.08 hectare. Small and marginal holdings below 2 hectares constituted 86.21% of the total land holdings. Out of the total of 146 million hectares of operated area in the country, the highest contribution of operational land holdings follows Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra, MP, Karnataka. Agricultural holdings have been classified into three categories: economic holding, two, family holding, three, optimum holding. Economic holding. It is that holding which ensures a minimum satisfactory standard of living to a family. In other words, economic holding is a minimum essential area for profitable agriculture. Family holding. Family holding is that holding which gives work to average size family having one plow under the traditional farming system. In other words, family holding is a low unit which is neither less nor more for an average size family to cultivate it properly. Optimum holding. Maximum size of the holding which must be possessed and owned by a family is called optimum holding. Green Revolution Introduction. It is the introduction of new techniques of agriculture which became popular by the name of the Green Revolution around the world in the early 1960s, at first for wheat and by the next decade for rice too. It revolutionized the very traditional idea of food production by giving a boost by more than 250% to the productivity level. The Green Revolution was centered around the use of the high-yielding variety of seeds developed by the US agro-scientist Norman Borlaug and used by farmers in food-deficient countries such as Mexico by the early 1960s. Components of Green Revolution. Concept of Green Revolution was primarily based on ensuring the timely and adequate supply of many inputs or components. The main components were the following: the high yield variety seeds, the chemical fertilizers, the irrigation, chemical pesticides and germicides, chemical herbicides and weedicides, credit, storage, marketing, distribution. Impact of Green Revolution. The Green Revolution had its positive as well as negative socio-economic and ecological impacts on the countries around the world. We will specially study the impact in India here. 1. Ecological impact. Soil fertility being degraded, water table falling down, environmental degradation due to excessive and uncontrolled use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides, toxic level in food chain. Socioeconomic impact. Discrepancy in farmers' income that brought with itself increased the interpersonal as well as inter-regional disparities inequalities in India. Rise in the incidence of malaria due to waterlogging, a swing in the balanced cropping patterns in favor of wheat and rice, putting pulses, oilseeds, maize, barley on the margins, etc. Food management, cropping pattern in India. The set and combination of crops which farmers opt for in a particular region in their farm practices is cropping pattern of the region. Multiplicity of cropping systems has been one of the main features of Indian agriculture. It is attributed to rain-fed agriculture and prevailing socio-economic situations of the farming community. The cropping pattern in India has undergone significant changes over time. As the cultivated area remains more or less constant, the increased demand for food because of increase in population and urbanization puts the agricultural land under stress. It has been resulted in crop intensification and crop substitution of food crops with commercial crops. An important consequences of improper land reforms and other factors is that crop production in India remain to be considered by and large a subsistence rather than the commercial activity. One of the typical characteristics of subsistence farming is that most of the farmers resort to grow a number of crops on their farm holdings, primarily to fulfill their household needs and follow the practice of rotating a particular crop combination over a period of 3 to 4 years interchangeably on different farm fields. Cropping systems of a region are decided by the following factors: geographical factors, soil, landform, precipitation, moisture, altitude, etc. Socio-cultural factors, food habits, festivals, tradition, etc. Infrastructure factors, irrigation, transport, storage, trade and marketing, post-harvest handling and processing, etc. Economic factors, financial resource base, land ownership, size and type of land holding, household needs of food, fodder, fuel, fiber and finance, labor availability, etc. Technological factors, improved varieties of seeds and plants, mechanization, plants protection, access to information, etc. A wave of change in the cropping pattern comes with the process of economic reforms commencing in 1991, which brings in new opportunities together with the challenges in the area of farm sector, such as the issue of food security continued to give pressure on policymakers as food grains production was not able to keep pace with the population growth rate. The situation becomes even more serious with food rights given to a large population of the country recently. Globalization brought in new opportunities of farm exports together with the challenge of cheap production in the wake of the agricultural provisions of the World Trade Organization. It made India think of mobilizing huge investments in the sector to farm mechanization and commercial farming so that Indian farm products can compete in the global markets. India accepts agriculture as an industry in 2000, giving green signal to corporate and contract farmings. Ecologically sustainable farming becomes the need of the hour due to ensuring danger of climate change and environment related constraints. The government of India proposes for the second green revolution in 2002 with inclusion of the genetically modified foods GMFs minimum support price. The agricultural price policy in India emerged in the backdrop of food scarcity and price fluctuations provoked by drought, floods, and international prices for exports and imports. Minimum support price MSP is a form of market intervention by the government of India. It aims to ensure agricultural producers against any sharp fall in farm prices in the form of a guaranteed price to save farmers from distress sale. The MSPs are announced at the beginning of the sowing season for certain crops. The MSP was commenced with wheat for the 1966 to 67. Mainly, the MSPs are announced for the commodities including cereals, pulses, oilseeds, copra, raw cotton, raw jute, and Virginia flu cured VFC tobacco. It is announced on the basis of the recommendations of the Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices (CACP 1985). The major objectives are the following: to support the farmers from distress sales and to procure food grains for public distribution. The MSPs are fixed at the incentive level to fulfill the following purposes: 1. To induce more investment by farmers in the farm sector, to motivate farmers to adopt improved crop production technologies, and to enhance production and thereby farmers' income. In case the market price for the commodity falls below the announced minimum price due to bumper production and glut in the market, government agencies purchase the entire quantity offered by the farmers at the announced minimum price. With the new umbrella scheme, Pradhan Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshan Abhiyan (PM ASHA) announced by the government, there is a robust mechanism available to enable the farmers to realize the MSP in fuller measure. The umbrella scheme consists of three sub-schemes, that is, Price Support Scheme (PSS), Price Deficiency Payment Scheme (PDPS), and Private Procurement and Stockist Scheme (PPSS). Market Intervention Scheme. The Market Intervention Scheme (MIS) is similar to MSP, which is implemented on the request of state governments for procurement of perishable and horticultural commodities in the event of fall in the market prices. The scheme is implemented when there is at least a 10% increase in production or a 10% decrease in the ruling rates over the previous normal year. Proposal of market intervention scheme is approved on the specific request of the state or UT governments if the states or the UTs are ready to bear 50% loss, 25% in the case of northeastern states incurred on its implementation. Procurement prices. Besides the minimum support price (MSP), which was announced before sowing started, the government started announcing procurement prices after the harvesting of the crops, at which it purchased the crops from the farmers. Procurement prices were announced higher than the MSP since the government was lagging behind when its food grain procurement required to maintain the buffer stocks. But this increased price hardly served the purpose as a suitable incentive to farmers. Since the fiscal 1968 to 69, the government announced only the MSP, which is considered the procurement price too. Issue prices, the price at which the food grains are allowed by the government to offtake from the Food Corporation of India. In other words, this is the price at which the FCI sells its food grains. The government procured food grains are stored temporarily in the concerned states of their purchase and then transported to their decided FCI godowns as part of the buffer stock. From here, they head to the sale counters such as to the TPDS or open market sale. The transportation go down, the cost of maintaining the FCI, grain losses, etc., make the food grains touch higher price that is not affordable by the poor masses. Therefore, to make the food grains affordable to the consumers, the issue prices for food grains are set lower than the total cost of procurement and distribution. The gap is considered as the element of food subsidy in India. That is why the issue prices have never been market based prices. The FCI has been incurring huge losses in the form of food subsidies. Buffer stock. India has a policy of maintaining a minimum reserve of food grains only for wheat and rice so that food is available throughout the country at affordable prices around the year. The main supply from here goes to the public distribution system, now TPDS, and at times goes to the open market to check the rising prices if needed. As income levels of the BPL segment grow in future, the buffer norms for the food grains are supposed to be revised downward. But the logic of maintaining such stocks will remain for the purpose of market intervention by the government. Economic cost of food grains. The economic cost of food grains consists of three components, namely the MSP and bonus if applicable as the price paid to the farmers, two, procurement incidentals, and three, the cost of distribution. High economic cost necessitated a detailed review of the open-ended procurement policy, especially in states that offer high bonus on top of MSP and those that impose high taxes and statutory levies, as well as stocking and distribution policies. In this regard, the government set up a high level committee in August 2014 to suggest inter alia restructuring or unbundling of the FCI with a view to improve its operational efficiency and financial management. This committee was chaired by Shanta Kumar and known as Shanta Kumar Committee. Decentralized Procurement Scheme DPS. The Decentralized Procurement Scheme of the Government of India, that is, in operation since 1997, has evoked a good response from the state governments. Under this scheme, the designated states procure, store, and also issue food grains under TPTS. The difference between the economic cost of the state governments and a central issue price CIP is passed on to the state governments as subsidy. The government of India urged all states to adopt the DCP scheme so that costs of distribution can be saved. The decentralized system of procurement helps to cover the farmers under the MSP operations, improves the efficiency of the PDS, provides the varieties of food grains more suitable to the local taste, and reduces the transportation costs of the FCI. Open Market Sales Scheme. The FCI has been undertaking the sale of wheat at predetermined prices, reserve prices in the open market from time to time, known as the Open Market Sales Scheme (OMSS). This is aimed at serving the following objectives. 1. To enhance the market supply of food grains, to exercise a moderating influence on open market prices, to offload surplus stocks. Under this scheme, the government now adopts a policy of differential prices to encourage sale of older stock first. National Food Security Act 2013 (NFSA) aims to provide subsidized food grains to approximately two-thirds of the population, 75% in rural areas and 50% in the urban areas. It converts into legal entitlements for existing food security programs of central government, such as Midday Meal Scheme, Integrated Child Development Services Scheme, and Public Distribution System. Under it, grains like wheat, rice, and coarse grain will be distributed at a subsidized price of 3 rupees, rupees 2, and rupees 1 respectively. Pregnant women, lactating mothers, and children are entitled to get meals under prescribed nutrition by MDM and ICDS. Under it, high nutrition food is provided to children from the age group of 6 months to 14 years. Pregnant women and lactating mothers are to be entitled to get maternity benefit of rupees 6,000. Agriculture marketing. Agriculture marketing. Introduction. India's agri market is presently regulated by the Agricultural Produce Market Committee APMC Act enacted by the state governments. The APMC Act notifies agricultural commodities produced in the region such as cereals, edible oil seed pulses, fruits and vegetables, and even chicken, goat, sheep, sugar, fish, etc. and provides that first sale in these commodities can be conducted only under the aegis of the APMC through the commission agents licensed by the APMC set up under the Act. The functioning of the APMCs have always been a matter of debate among experts and policymakers alike, major issues being the following. They charge a market fee from buyers and they also charge a licensing fee from the commissioning agents who mediate between buyers and farmers. They also charge small licensing fees from a whole range of functionaries, warehousing agents, loading agents, etc. And the levies and other market charges vary widely in the states. Statutory levies, mandi tax, VAT, etc., are a major source of market distortions. The scope of Essential Commodities Act 1955 is much broader than the APMC Act. Model APMC Act. The Ministry of Agriculture developed a Model APMC Act 2003. The Model APMC Act provides the following new things. 1. Direct sale of farm produce. 2. Setting up special markets for specified agricultural commodities, mostly perishables. 3. Permits private persons, farmers, and consumers to establish new markets for agricultural produce in any area. A single levy of market fee on the sale of notified agricultural commodities in any market area replaces licensing with registrations of market functionaries which would allow them to operate in one or more different market areas, establishment of consumers and farmers market to facilitate direct sale of agricultural produce to consumers, creation of marketing infrastructure from the revenue earned by the APMCs provides some freedom to the farmers to sell their produce directly to the contract sponsors or in the market set up by private individuals, consumers, and producers. increases the competitiveness of the market of agri-produce by allowing common registration of market intermediaries. Supply chain management. A supply chain is a network of facilities and distribution options that performs the functions of procurement of materials, transformation, and the distribution. Supply chain activities cover everything such as product development, sourcing, production, logistics, and information systems for proper coordination. Physical flows and information flows links together the organizations that make up the supply chain. Physical flows involve the movement, storage, transformation of goods and materials. They are the most visible piece of the supply chain. WTO and agricultural subsidies, aggregate measures of support AMS, the subsidies provided by the government to the agricultural sector, that is, domestic support, is termed by the WTO as aggregate measure of support AMS. It is calculated in terms of product and input subsidies. The WTO argues that the product subsidies like minimum support prices and input subsidies, non-product like credit, fertilizers, irrigation and power will cut the production cost of farming and will give undue advantage to such countries in their access to world market. Therefore, such subsidies are called to cause distortions to the world trade. Such subsidies are not permitted in one sense, as they have a minimum permissible limit, the minimus under the provisions, which is 5% and 10% of the total agricultural output in the case of developed and developing countries, respectively. The agricultural subsidies in the WTO terminology have, in the general, been identified by boxes, namely amber box, blue box, green box. Amber box. All subsidies which are supposed to distort production and trade fall into the amber box. These are all agricultural subsidies except those which fall into the blue and green boxes. These include government policies of minimum support prices for agricultural products or any help directly related to production quantities as power, fertilizers, pesticides, irrigation, etc. Blue box. This is the amber box with conditions designed to reduce the distortions. Green box. The agricultural subsidies which cause minimal or no distortions to trade, not involve price support, basically includes all forms of government expenses which are not targeted at a particular product at all direct income support programs to farmers. This is a very wide box and includes the subsidies like public storage for food security, pest and disease control, research and extension, and some direct payments to farmers that do not stimulate production like restructuring of agriculture, environmental protection, regional development, crop and income insurance. That is why this box is called as production neutral box. Social and development box. S&D box allows the developing countries for some subsidies to the agriculture sector under certain conditions. These conditions revolve around human development issues. Developing countries can forward such subsidies to the extent of less than 5% of their total agricultural output. Export subsidies. For export subsidy, the WTO has provisions in the following two categories: reduction in the total budgetary support on export subsidies and reduction in the total quantity of exports covered by the subsidy. Higher reduction commitment for the development countries and lower for the developing countries are the provisions. But the developed nations forward such an inflated support to their agricultural exports that even after the committed reductions, it will be highly price distorting against the agri exports of the developing countries. It is therefore opposed by the developing countries. Sanitary and phytosanitary measures. The provisions of the WTO allow member countries to set their own health and safety standards, provided they are justified on scientific grounds and do not result in arbitrary or unjustified barrier to trade. The provisions encourage use of international standards and also include certain special and differential treatment in favor of the developing countries. Challenges before Indian agriculture: self-sufficiency of food, cropping pattern, price stability, WTO commitments, weaker sections.